Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan Metal video. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at basically a little discussion around the importance of AOE attacks and why they are so important in Dokkan. Now, I just want to obviously preface this by saying that I do cover how all-out attack work in obviously like my video on all-out target attacks. And if you want more information on some of the mechanical natures of the attack, then of course you can see there. Now, two things are super important to understand. Firstly, when it comes to all-out attacks, a lot of game modes, especially super hard ones, you generally fight one boss. So a lot of the times you have to, really not be concerned by this mechanic. Essentially, when you're facing red zone or blue zone or things like that, maybe even sometimes the first phase is multiple enemies, but a lot of the times events quickly descend into being one-on-one because people face one really strong boss at a time. However, there are certain bits of content where AOE attacks take on greater importance. Super Battle Road, Extreme Super Battle Road are definitely those that tend to spring to mind. But World Tournament is very often the place where people definitely need AOE attacks, because without AOE attacks it would take forever to clear a World Tournament. On top of that as well, you also have, of course, certain other instances, like Breaking the Siege is a great example. As you can see here, I'm just doing a casual run of Breaking the Siege. But Breaking the Siege is an event that's been added in to assist with testing or being an AOE DPS check. And aside from that, there's tons of other events, whether it's events that are similar in style to Breaking the Siege that often come out for breaking tiles or defeating enemies, or again, just certain events where you're fighting multiple enemies. I think for me the big ones are definitely World Tournament, definitely Breaking the Siege, and definitely obviously ESPR and SPR. I think that's where you see AOE attacks taking on a great prevalence and definitely a greater importance. Now, where or why do AOE attacks, take on that importance, and also what about them causes them issues elsewhere? Well, firstly, let's just talk simply about the attack stat. A lot of the times, AOE attacks are not as strong as singular attacks. It's a lot of the reason why people have an issue with physical radits is because as attacks in AOE, you can kind of almost purposefully tell that the developers have reduced his attack stat. It's similar to any kind of AOE unit, really. A lot of the times they reduce their attack stat, and the reason is quite simple. Let's say, for example, you have a unit that does 14 million in damage, or 14 million as an attack stat. 14 million on one target in SPR is really good. It might eliminate them. 14 million on all 5 targets, well, that's going to eliminate the entire round. It doesn't mean that, all AOE units are gimped. I think now we're seeing a trend, especially with how many strong follow-up attacks units are getting. I noticed with the Int Goku that they definitely are not seemingly holding back on AOE units anymore. I think they've realized that gimping the AOE unit too much because of the fact that they do an AOE attack doesn't actually help a lot in general. And they're just being more selective now about AOE attacks, and I think this is the better strategy to take, because the thing is AOE attacks, in general, shouldn't gimp the functionality of a unit. When you look at units and how they work, when you look at how strong those units are, when you look at how well they incorporate into teams, I think when you gimp that unit solely for the fact that they can do an AOE attack, I think it wasn't the right game design. And it seems like they're stemming away from that, although they still factor in a little bit. So AOE attacks are important for character design, but also in terms of AOE attacks, They are very important for strategy. Again, obviously tied to the aforementioned game modes, but AoE attacks can have a lot of prevalence, especially AoE utility attacks. Sometimes it's not so much about the damage stat, because a lot of the units will not have good damage stats. But if you look at the utility, then you start to understand that AoE attacks can have really, really, really strong prevalence. For example, one of the reasons why I like using the physical LR Krillin so much is because physical LR Krillin has stunning on his super attack. This for me is incredibly helpful. Stunning on his super attack is really, really, really solid and incredibly, incredibly useful for me as someone who's building their team. Whether this is for World Tournaments, SBR, ESBR, it also means you may want to hold prevalence to the 12 key. A lot of the times with Krillin, I don't actively seek out his 18 key. I seek out the 12 key because in a lot of the situations I'm using him in, the stunning is more vital to me than the attack and defense lowering on the 18 key. At the same token, you may need to balance that key control, and that's very prevalent on LRs. For example, Nappa and Vegeta. Nappa and Vegeta are an LR that also have an AoE attack on their 12 key. Again, a lot of your play around Nappa and Vegeta, much like Krillin, is about controlling your key level. Making sure you have 12 key, not 18 key, making sure that suits the situation. And this is another important aspect of AoE attacks, especially in terms of LRs. A lot of it is about controlling that level of damage or utility you want to apply. So AoE attacks are very important from a game design, tactical, and just a fundamental point of view.